to the Metal Command Podcast.
Greetings and welcome yet again to another edition of the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you. Always excited to be here. And as always, if you do like what you see and hear on this podcast, by all means, if you want to support the show, hit the subscribe button, hit that little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video. And of course, if you are following this show on any other form of social media, by all means, give us a like and a follow there. Today's show, I have an interview with Giles Lavrey. Giles, of course, is the singer of Warlord. He is singing on the upcoming Jack Star album. He sings in the band Alcatrazz. Also has a new album coming out with his band Dragonsclaw. And Giles is a great dude. He's a really fun guy to have on the show. I had him on once about a year ago now. But not only does he sing in all of these bands, but he manages bands. He works for Bravewords Records, which is a new record label, which is pretty much a partnership with the guys from Bravewords and Bloody Knuckles, Bravewords.com, a magazine that I have followed and a group of people I have followed for probably the last 30 years. So Giles and I talk about the upcoming Jack Star album. We talk about the Warlord album. We talk about Bravewords Records and a lot of other cool stuff. So stay tuned. Here you go. This is the interview with myself and Giles Lavrey. Check it out. Welcome, everybody, back to the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you today, and I have a special guest, of course, an interview with Giles Lavrey. Giles sang on the latest Warlord album, which was in the top albums of the year list for this show. He also sings in the band Alcatrazz, and we're also here to talk about him singing on the upcoming Jack Star album, which I'm really excited for. Giles, thanks for coming on.
Hey, man, good to be here, brother. Always good to be here.
So, you're in Jack Starr's band. Let's start off with that.
Yes.
Definitely a really great song. Definitely something that didn't surprise me because he had come on my show at one point a couple years ago, and he actually spoke very highly of you. He had brought your name up a few times, talking about his band and stuff like that. But I'm really excited for this album. So let's talk about it and, let's get some details from you on it.
Well, it's called Out of the Darkness 2. Jack came to me and said, I want to make a sequel to my 1984 classic album, Out of the Darkness. He had a number of songs that were very much in that ilk, more kind of, classic heavy rock, heavy metal, and less kind of US power metal in the sense, if you've heard the record, something like Tonight We Ride and
Yep.
songs like that. There are some tracks that are very much kind of what I would say Burning Star, but it's quite an eclectic album in the sense. There's even like a ballad, which is something that could have been more in line with what he was doing on the Out of the Darkness record. So
right.
It definitely has a thread musically to the original Out of the Darkness. It's not just using the name because it's convenient. It's definitely. When you listen to a lot of that record, you will hear the similarities there, stylistically. And I thought it was a good idea. I mean, I thought it was different enough that it warranted that. It wasn't just like, and there's no disrespect to Burning Star, but it wasn't just, yet another record by Jack Starr's Burning Star that's, obviously done very, very well, and the quality's always been very, very high. But this was obviously a decision he made to kind of take a turn and revisit, an older style of his, musical canon, and which he's done. And it was great to cut the songs. I mean, funnily enough, this album was cut without a click track. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you the story. And when he said it wasn't by any real grand design either, it was kind of a happy accident in a way that Rhino cut the drums because he's on every song except for one, which Mark Zonder plays on the other. But it was cut to the drums. And that's a nightmare. When you're recording long distance, you got to have a click going. When you got people all using different softwares, software recording, setups and emailing files. It's not like you're all in the room watching the drummer, right? So you got to have everyone on a click. And I said to Jack, I said, okay, what's the tempo? Because I'm going to cut my vocals, so let me put the tempo in my session for each song. Well, I don't know, you know. And I'm like, he goes, we just recorded to Rhino. We didn't. So we had a few teething problems, shall we say, just from a technical perspective that didn't have any negative effect on the finished product. But as we ventured through it, I kind of came to the conclusion, hang on a minute, we're making an old school record here. This is a ridiculously hard way to do it, spread out across the world without everyone in the same room, where you would just be, you know, working and reacting to the drummer. But we actually are making an old school record in the sense that there's no click track, there's no grid, we're following the drummer, and it took a little bit of getting used to, in the sense that I realized I'd never made a record like that, because every record I'd done, you know, I came up in a certain era where there was a click track, you know, bang, 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 and a tempo, and a, you know, in the age of, you know, internet file sharing and recording, and it was a little bit. It took a bit of time to get my head around with it, and I thought, is there something wrong with this? It just feels odd. And then finally, it dawned on me, no, it's not wrong. This is how it used to be. Mm-hmm. It's got, you know, the songs have a natural movement that you don't get with that real rigid, you know, grid, click on the grid. And it took a bit of getting used to, and I realized that our ears and our, you know, methods of doing things have changed so much, where we're almost, you know, using these things as a crutch. And we just almost by blind ignorance, we wound up making a record that was very old school in that sense, where there's no, mm-hmm. you know, there was none of that. We were just playing to the drums, recording to the drums. And, you know, you talk to Thomas Megler, who co-produced and mixed and mastered this record, and he'll tell you that, you know, it was tough putting it together under those circumstances, but it gave the album a very old school feel that I think turned out really, really well.
The song Rise Up, what is that track about?
The way Jack described, because Jack wrote all the lyrics and the music. The track Rise Up, Jack said, is a symbol of people that are sick of being censored, being cancelled, mm-hmm. being perhaps sick of, you know, having a certain viewpoint rammed down their throat and told that that's the way you're meant to think these days, and mm-hmm. you can't say that these days, and you can't say this. Well, it's time to rise up and say, hang on a minute, this is our world as well. This is our country as well.
Right.
And you know, we have a right to live our lives too. So,
sure.
You know, that's what Rise Up's about.
So one of the things I just said on a episode of the podcast, when I heard the song that you did, in a little bit of a preview of some of the other songs on the album, I noticed one thing that was a difference between this record and a lot of the other records he's done, even the last one. And I've noticed this in Warlord, because I own all the Warlord albums. You came in, and I think that you have always had this talent for coming up with really, really good vocal melodies on the top of these songs. It's like you kind of take that to a different level than most people would. Now, I also said that I think Jack Starr is like one of the perfect, or as I call it, he's like one of the gold standard examples of what American power metal would sound like. And I told you this in a message, that you are like perfect for that kind of music. And when I heard this, it was, you know, I expected this to be really good. I was shocked that it's up, probably has gone up another level from that. I
Wow.
think, and I really say that because I think that you two together, as musicians, I think you just fit so well together. Just much like you fit with like Bill Samos's writing with Warlord. So a lot of the stuff on the last Warlord album, that was one of the things that I noticed about that. And I noticed that with you and Jack Starr as well. But when you sing, your singing voice is really just suited to this kind of American style power metal. And this is my initial reaction. But like I said, I was like, damn, I told you, I'm like, man, I want to like listen to more of this, right? So I think that you two make a really, really great team together. And, those were my initial thoughts, and I figured I'll let you respond from there.
Well, first of all, thank you very, very much for the kind words and the compliment. And I just plugged my phone in because I realized I was down to 10%, so I'm hoping that's charging. But yeah, just to reference what you said, first of all, thank you. And the vocal melodies, I grew up with bands like Foreigner and Survivor, Journey, every bit as much as I grew up with Iron Maiden and Judas Priest, who also had great melodies and hooks and choruses and interesting vocal parts and putting a high octave with a lower octave to create that, like what Halford would do, a lot. And
yeah,
and harmony vocals, and just dropping a harmony in on a line in a verse can make it just sound so much more interesting than just singing it straight through. So I've always been very conscious of that, to try and whether I succeed or fail from one song to the next, my effort that I put forth, my goal rather, is every word that I sing, every word, I try and make it sound interesting.
Correct.
Like if I sing the, do, go, this, that, I at least try and make it sound like a good that, or a good this, or a good, I don't want any kind of filler takes where, you hear a lot of records where certain words in a line haven't been given that attention and certain words have. I try and make sure every word, at least if you were to isolate that word, has a certain element of conviction, character, color, tone, or uniqueness to it, so that when you put it all together, it's even if you didn't like it, at least it's interesting, if you know what I mean. So keeping in mind, I also, hooks, melodies, or, something memorable. And something, when you're doing a session, when you're singing someone else's material, you are obviously limited in a lot of ways to the way they want it sung. At least make it sound like there's a certain amount of conviction or interest on the part of the singer. But Jack was actually very... He said, look, just change a few words if you have to. Because guitar players generally can't write for singers. They put too many words in, a lot of the time. They put way too many words in, and you lose that melody because you need... It's like a guitarist sometimes put too many notes in. If you have a chorus where you have the big balloon chords, the big da, 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 the singer can go any place. But if you've got you've pretty much got no choice but just to follow that.
Yeah.
So it's the same with words. If there's too many words, you can't structure a melody. So Jack said, hey, modify the words, modify the line, modify the melody if you want. Do something if you feel like you can, if you feel like you can improve it. And in some cases I felt I could. In other cases I thought what Jack had done was ideal.
Right.
So that's where the collaboration came from, I think. He wrote the lyrics and he wrote the music, but he left that door open for me to change the cadence, the melody, the phrasing, the, et cetera, et cetera. So I was grateful for that, because it can be a bit of a drag when you get like, Melody Mike who goes, don't change my, I've had some sessions where it's like Don't change my melody. Don't change the cadence. Don't change the phrasing. And well, then you should just sing it, because I'm my own singer, and I'm unique, because everyone is. Every singer is unique unto themselves. It doesn't matter whether it's a death metal band or whatever.
Yeah.
Every vocalist is unique. And just to totally like do a carbon copy of someone else's performance, it's really, I find that some people are very good at that, and it's a real gift, but I find it really hard. I need to have that freedom to, put my own thing into it. And Jack allowed me to do that. And for that, I was very grateful.
Yeah. I think you just have a vision for that. I mean, it's, I guess if you're not a musician, it's hard to explain it, but you just have a vision of like, almost like, and you're a big music fan, like I am. And the way I've always approached that is, what would I want to hear if someone, if I were somebody listening to this record, right? But you have a very good vision as to where, you talked about each word having its own conviction. You're very good about placing that word and that melody and that note right where it needs to be. And I think like I said, the combination of you and Jack with this music, I think is outstanding. And I was a little bit blown away by that, actually.
Oh, wow.
Because his songwriting, which I've always liked, and I think you, in placing your vocal melodies where they are, I just think it just works. I think the album's going to probably be received better than you probably think it will. Let's put it that way.
Well, I mean, that yeah, and you never know, because sometimes you do what you think's an amazing record, and people go, yeah, that's nice, that's cool, yeah, that's all right. And then other times you do a record that you just think, oh, well, we got to the end of that one, okay, and then people love it.
Yeah.
Again, it comes from sort of different places as well. I mean, soul music is very vocal. I mean, that's very vocal orientated, with certain lines and words become, an intrinsic part of the rhythm and the feel of everything. And theater, if you go to see a theater production,
right,
it's very important in that sense as well. And I like to listen to different singers and different types of music. So there's probably all sorts of stuff kind of floating around up here, and it comes out here. Sure. And that, and some of it may be instinctive, some of it may just be a homogenization of, all kinds of different things, that I've picked up over the years. I tend to say usually we owe it all to Lou Gramm. And if you spoke to him, he'd probably say he owes it all to Sam Cooke or Paul Rodgers or whoever his influences are. So,
sure,
it's, we're all kind of this amalgamation of, things we've picked up over the years. But that's the things I look out for, is just to make things sound interesting. It doesn't have to be completely, totally original. At least it has to be interesting.
Yeah. Bravewords Records. I want to talk about this with you. So, sure. I was the kid growing up, going to my local HMV, buying the printed magazine of Bravewords and Bloody Knuckles, got the sampler. I remember a long time ago, Tim let me write a small article on a page in one of the magazines about a band that I knew really well, and which was actually my first ever published article at all before I was writing for car magazines and stuff like that. But I grew up with Bravewords, man, and I'm actually surprised they didn't try to start a record label sooner, but I want to talk about that for a little bit. You have Bravewords Records, you got some new, you got pretty cool, you got some really cool bands on that label. You just signed Aska, who's, George is a buddy of mine.
I love Aska.
Yeah. And obviously this is coming out in there. Talk about starting up that label. Because, Tim Anderson has always been a really cool dude. Anytime I've ever, the times that I met him back in the day, and it just blew my mind that they would maybe not have started something up like this sooner, especially having the reputation and being as established as they are.
I think he's had the will and the idea for a while. Starting a label for the right reasons is equally as hard as starting a band.
Right.
For the right reasons. And the right reasons being an enthusiasm for music and wanting to treat people fairly and do the right thing and do it properly. Budgets obviously play a huge part in running a label. I mean, it's like I've always said, opening a label is like opening a restaurant. You got to be ready to make no money for the first couple of years. You know, you just need to keep the doors open, and the bills just keep on coming.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you know, one thing bands always talk about is, well, we wish we had a label that really got behind our release, you know, and didn't just do the whole, you know, first 2 weeks and then you're done. You know, first 2 weeks and then we're done, and no one. If that.
Yeah. They get the, you know, like a lot of labels, they'll hype it up, and as soon as it comes out, it's like it's like that's it.
It's like they ran out of money to pay the PR guy. They go, "We can afford you for 2 weeks."
Yeah.
Well, we have all that in house. Michael Brandvold is a great PR guy. Well, guess what? He's a partner in the label. Tim has one of the biggest hubs of heavy metal, hard rock news and information, and that's, he's a partner in the label.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm involved in managing a number of international acts, and I'm a singer, and I'm you know, so I can come from all different sides of the table in a way that I can relate to an artist as an artist. I can relate to my colleagues at the label as a label guy. I can relate to managers as a manager, and so I can have those conversations on an intellectual level with people where we've got the bases covered. And you know, the tricky thing is, obviously, you know, a lot of bands, and we're all guilty of this, you know, in bands, we all say we want the promo. We want the you know, we want a promo for who's talking about our record 3 months after release? Well, Bravewords will be. But then bands also have this habit of just signing a deal with someone who gives them $800 more than the label that didn't. Okay, so if you have label A, label B, label A gives you like $1,000 more than the other label, but the other label promises all kinds of things. Well, you kind of weigh that up. You go, well, I've heard all kinds of promises before. I'll probably just go with the money, you know. But you know, what I can say is, we're the best of both worlds in the sense that we want to, you know, and promotion's only as good as the artist is willing to work with the label. A lot of the time you get an artist that says, right, promote my record. Okay, well, can you give us some content, please? Yeah. You know, can you be available for interviews? Can you give us, turn on your phone, hit record, and give us a song-by-song video of every single song on the record. Give us a gear rundown. Give us some playthrough videos. If artists give us that content, we can work their record for 6 months. The big mistake a lot of artists make is they just push all the promo back on the label, but they don't create any content.
Yeah, you know.
And I've had artists that have said, well, I don't want to film a playthrough video, and I don't want to do a song by song where I talk about each song, and I don't want to do like a rig rundown of my gear. I don't want to talk about my guitars. I don't want to do some filming on the road. I don't want to tell old tour stories. I don't want to talk about old albums because I can't be bothered. You're the label, you promote it. And I'm like, okay, so there's about 8 months worth of content that you just said you will not do. You know, so it really has to be a relationship where, you know, and I do wish a lot more artists would understand that, but that the more content they provide, the more it works. And I think things like Patreon and obviously, you know, I mean, a smaller degree Cameo has kind of educated a lot of artists in the sense that, hey, if you do get in front of that camera and make it, you know, make yourself a lot closer to the fans, it can, you know, reap rewards, whether it's saying happy birthday to someone for money or whether it's, you know, having content behind a paywall. But it can also definitely help you give your record some legs. If you can run a news story on Bravewords once a week because you've got new content that we can shout and scream about and promote, you're in good shape. You know, because we got a million visitors every month to that site. Yeah, and we want to promote your record.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about that? I just had a publicist on my show not long ago, and we talked about exactly that. One of the biggest obstacles that he was telling me that he faced were people in bands that think, oh, because I sign up with a publicist or I have a label behind me that's like the golden ticket and I don't have to work at all for anything. But the reality is they have to really probably step up their game even more. And that is a rut a lot of new bands that are inexperienced to run into. And I'm glad you brought that up.
It's not even an experienced new bands. It's guys that have been in the game 50 years, 40 years. They can be, it's like dragging a horse to water.
Yeah.
And we all love our bands, and we all love the guys in the bands, and you just want them to do better. It's not like this is a criticism. You just go, wow, we want to do better for you. We want you to do better for you. We want to work together. And, have you got some new photos? And they'll send, like a picture they've downloaded off Facebook, or a grainy picture off Facebook they've downloaded of themselves. It's not even like 1 megabyte in like file size. As soon as I see that attached to the email with the file name, all those like letters and numbers that Facebook automates, I'm like, oh, well, now we've got low-res photos. We can't do anything with that. No print media is going to print that. It's going to be a pixelated mess. Please get some new photos done. Well, I can't this week, and I can't next week. I might be able to get something done. Like, I've got a friend coming around. He could probably take some pictures with the phone. And man, we are in the most visual asset orientated era times 10 what it was MTV in the 80s.
Correct.
Video killed the radio star. Well, the internet killed the video star, I think Robbie Williams said, or something like that. And you got to have visual assets aplenty, and you got to, play, like I said, play through videos, song by song analysis of the album. Just film yourself cooking. Anything is content. Anything can be turned into a news story, and that can be used to promote your brand, your product, that record that you just spent like 2 years of your life working on, that you don't want to die after 2 weeks. Create that content. And you'll be amazed at how beneficial that can be. And again, we have in-house a fantastic PR guy that's not going to run out, on you in 2 weeks because, that's all the label is going to pay him for. Well, he is a partner in the label, so
yeah, I get his emails too, by the way. So
he'll promote your record for 8 months if you give him content. So. Yeah. That's my advice to any young bands, older bands that want to kind of do a bit of housekeeping and kind of shake things up and get out of that rut. That would be my advice.
Yeah. I want to backtrack a little bit to the last Warlord album, because one, it was one of my favorite albums of the year last year. But I remember it's so funny how everybody that I know that especially people that without Bill thought it was not going to be good, and it ended up being very good, and it got a lot of praise from most people. Talk about that a little bit, because
in a sense, people say without Bill, but that's Bill's music. I mean, it was my lyrics for the most part, my vocal melodies for the most part, but every piece of music, take away the vocals, take away the vocal melodies. If it was an instrumental album, everything you're hearing there is Bill's composition. Whether it was a riff, a 8-bar riff that we put together with another 8-bar riff, and those two work together well. And there's a chorus over here that would fit in there. Or if it was something that he had written top to bottom, boom, because there was a few of them. Or if it was something there's 2 songs that he did for Lordy and Guard. Behold a Pale Horse and the a Revelation. So it's all Bill's music. So Bill was there, and we even used some of his guitar tracks obviously as well, and then Eric played very, 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 very faithfully to Bill's demos. And to say it's without Bill, well, that's doing him a huge disservice, because compositionally, that was his music.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. I just remember there was some backlash, but now I think the album, I mean, I haven't really seen anything negative about it. I mean, how was the reception to that album?
There is
for you guys?
There is a small and it is overwhelmingly positive response that humbled me and blew me away. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah,
I mean, I thought if we had 40% of people on side, that would be a win. I'm telling you, it was almost unanimous. I mean, people were writing me apologizing, saying like, wow, I'm sorry that I thought this was going to be like a horrible record,
Mm-hmm.
There is a small, very, very faithful, and I don't really blame them because they're very faithful to Bill. There is a small collective of diehards, and it's probably about 50 people
Mm-hmm.
who didn't want to like this, didn't like this, will never like this, and will never say anything good about this record. This record could, come to life and do somersaults and whatever, and they would still say, "No, it's rubbish." There's a very small collective that, it's like people that think that Riot shouldn't be Riot without Mark Reale.
Mm-hmm.
Most people love what Riot do now, but there is still that little, cluster of detractors. So we've got a couple of them, and that's okay. But I'm telling you, like 98%, 99%, I couldn't believe it. It's just so many. I rang Jimmy and I said, "Look, I'm struggling to find a bad review here." Because I sometimes read the bad ones because they're kind of like, sometimes they're entertaining. It's kind of funny, because I've got a very self-effacing sense of humor. So I'm like, there's got to be a bad one here somewhere. Someone that just trashes us,
sure.
And I couldn't find one. So I'm like, wow, this is awesome.
Yeah, I couldn't find a bad review on it either. So once in a while, I get curious because when that album was basically like announced, I was kind of like, there was a kind of a mixed reaction to it. And you remember the mixed reaction. Then you put out the emails, and then between you and Bill, and that kind of went down a little bit. But once it came out, it was like I didn't see any of that. I mean,
and I got loads more emails that go into great detail.
Mm-hmm, I'm sure. Yeah.
I put out a couple. Me and Mark put out a couple just as a.
Yeah.
We don't need to start publishing 50 emails from Bill just to justify what we're doing. Where Bill goes into like deep private stuff and explicitly says to carry on, and people would be surprised what's in those emails. It would turn the whole thing on its head in the sense of like,
I'm sure,
of even what Warlord is and was, and Bill would be the first to say how important Mark Zonder is to Warlord and the Warlord sound. So
yeah,
I mean, I'm not going to start sharing like every piece of private correspondence me and Bill had to try and justify what we're doing. We shared a couple of things that made it clear. We stated our intentions, our love for Bill, for the legacy of the band, for keeping his music out there. Because how many people are talking about Sabotage now?
A lot.
Versus how many people were talking about Sabotage this time last year.
Mm-hmm.
This time last year, Sabotage were just a really good band that if you were kind of like, if you're into metal, you know about Sabotage. Now there's people discovering Sabotage because there's this buzz about their upcoming shows, and we don't have either Oliva brother involved in these shows. Obviously, sadly, we lost Chris. It's 33 years ago, 32 years ago, and wow, time flies. And then John is
93, if I remember correctly.
And John is unwell and can't be there, which is unfortunate. And I hope he's okay, or he's going to be okay, But you look at the lineup. Okay, who's the most recent addition to that lineup? Al Petrelli joined in like 95.
Yeah, 94, 90. I think 95. Yeah, Dead Winter Dead.
95. So the most recent dude in the band has been there for 30 years The next most recent dude was probably Jeff Plate. He joined in like 93. And then, so that's like 32 years. And then the next most recent dude joined in 92, and that's Zach, the lead singer of like 4 or 5 records.
Yeah. Who was personally picked by John, by the way.
Who was personally picked by John. John is obviously involved in everything that's going to happen on that stage.
Mm-hmm.
So, how can it not be sabotage? It's like Johnny Lee Middleton's been, and Caffrey came, he was in and out, but, he was on the Mountain King tour. Johnny Lee Middleton joined on the Fight for the Rock. I mean, we're getting into 40 years here. I mean, this is, okay, they're not original members, but I mean, it's pretty close, you know what I mean? It's, so I've heard some detractors, no John Lever, no Sabotage, but
yeah,
the songs are going to show up every night, aren't they? And they were written by John and Chris.
Yeah,
and how can it be a tribute band when you've got guys of like 30-year tenures, 40-year tenures in the band?
Yeah, I remember the tribute band accusations for them. I recorded an episode. So just so you know, the first band I ever met, like actual real like known band, was this lineup of Sabotage plus John.
Yeah,
and that was 27 years ago. It was right before I started my show, and I actually was carting Chris and John around Cleveland for a little bit. But the thing is, these guys had been. Here's how I look at it. I look at it the same way that I look at the whole Pantera reunion. Or what what we were talking about with Sabotage is that, do you want the music to be out there and played live or not? I mean, to me, these songs deserve to be played live. And if you're going to go out and play these songs live, it might as well be with the guys that were brought into the band in the mid 90s. And that's how I look at that.
And it's like, it's sanctioned by like the original dudes.
Exactly.
Or the estate. I mean, look at Magnum. They've just had this triumphant run of tribute shows to Tony.
Mm-hmm.
And people are saying, like, they're like, wow, I feel bad saying this, but this is one of my favorite Magnum shows I've ever seen.
Yeah.
What is the harm? Who's going to get hurt? Okay, so this great music, Sabotage, Magnum, Warlord, Foreigner, this great music and these great songs are going to be played in front of thousands and thousands, tens of thousands even people.
Mm-hmm.
And they will, and inevitably reaching ears that have never heard them before.
Right.
What is the harm? Who's getting hurt? What is the disadvantage? I don't understand. If you don't personally wish to, and I get it. If you go, well, okay, the reason I loved band X is because of band member Y. They're not there anymore. Therefore, I have no use for band X. Great. I get it. I feel the same way about 1 or 2 artists myself. So I choose not to go. But if 6,000 people in a venue somewhere are having a great time listening to it, there's no harm. No one's getting hurt. It's like, it doesn't, I just don't know why people have to react so negatively, like you're kind of like destroying their fairy tale or something. It seems so strange to me.
Yeah, but it's funny you say that. I said that about the Sabotage thing. I said the same thing about Pantera, even though you don't have the Abbott brothers. Again, you have the guy that sang all the songs that really were big for them. And then you have two guys who are seasoned musicians, and Zakk Wylde and Charlie Benante, who were not only a fan of the music, but they were friends with these dudes. So it's not like they're not going to put in the effort to make the shows good. So
you make a good point. They got Phil Anselmo, the guy who sang on those records. Well, is that not good enough? So by saying that, you're saying that, like, okay, well, if it was the other way around, you took Phil out, and there was like, let's just say in an alternate universe, it was like Vinnie Paul Dimebag, and then a different guy replacing Phil, and a guy replacing Rex.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you'd still be saying, well, that ain't Pantera. There's no Phil.
Right. Exactly.
Exactly. so take your pick. Now there is a Phil. So, it's, again, I think a lot of people, people don't like change. But to be so negative and down on something that's doing well, what people don't realize in this business, and some people realize it, but a lot of people don't, is an active entity, a band, a show, creates far more opportunities for the music than a dormant entity.
Correct.
It creates licensing opportunities, merchandising opportunities, catalog opportunities, synchronization, songs getting used in video games and films, and just being out there living and breathing in a real way, has an active entity representing that music, whether it be a band with one original member, no original members, and a bunch of guys that have been in the band a long time, or whatever. I mean, think about Riot. If Riot had just died after Immortal Soul, their catalog would be collecting dust right now.
Mm-hmm.
There would be Rock Candy reissuing a couple of the records, Metal Blade, whatever, but there's a lot less willingness for a label to do that if there's no one out there touring, representing it, and promoting it. So catalogs tend to just fade away. And, obviously if you've got an evergreen catalog like the Creedence Clearwater Revival or Beatles, it's a little bit different. But, for our genre of music, for bands that were not like that, those bands I just mentioned, you got to have someone out there kind of flying the flag for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates more opportunities for that music to live on throughout into the future.
Right. Another band that falls under the category we were talking about that people have kind of stopped complaining about, band on Bravewords Records, Crimson Glory. As soon as they heard Travis Wills sing, those songs, that whole thing of, no Midnight, no Crimson Glory, no John Drenning, no Crimson Glory, kind of went out the window, and people don't realize there's 3 original guys in the band. Queensryche.
I mean, the Queensryche was an interesting one because Jeff Tate had made himself. And again, I wasn't there. I didn't see what really happened. I didn't see I have no reason to disbelieve the story the Queensryche guys have stated.
Yeah.
I have no reason to disbelieve anything Jeff Tate said. I wasn't there. But it appeared from the outside that Jeff Tate had made himself so unpopular that this was an interesting one. The direction the music had taken was being so poorly received that he was almost like, when he pushed out the door, it was when Rising West was announced, people were like, yeah, we've got our Queensryche back. That was kind of the same in reverse. It was people were so overjoyed they'd got a new singer. And then it took a couple of years. Then a couple of years later, some of the detractors sort of entered the picture. But I remember when that was first kind of announced, people were like, no more records like Dedicated to Chaos, bring it on, And I think Todd's just done such a wonderful job, fronting that band.
He has.
Yeah.
And they've put out pretty solid albums.
Has every one they've put out been a classic on par with like The Warning and all that? No.
Mm-hmm.
But they're very, very good albums. And I thought the last one, that came real close. That was like, now we're talking. That's a great record. That's a great record.
That's probably the best album they've put out with him in the band, to be honest.
And then there's been some really good songs like I thought the 2013 album was pretty solid, and I thought that there was a song called Bulletproof that I thought was really good.
Yeah.
Off what's the one with the little girl standing on the stool reaching up? Condition Human.
Yeah.
That one. Yeah. And there's been some real cool music come out from that lineup. And I thought the last album was like where that lineup really was like, boom, there we go. Done.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's cool. You have Crimson Glory on that label. I was thrilled to see you signed Aska, which was I just can't say enough good about that band. More people need to know about that band. I agree.
This is a band that's been around since 92. They're like, if you're into Virgin Steel and Manowar and like classic US metal, and you listen to albums like, the last 3, man, there's some killer stuff there. This is not a new band. This is a band with history and a legacy.
And a lot of people don't know this. They got their start playing on the USO tour, playing in front of the military, and I think that's an interesting story. If you ever have George tell that story, it's really fascinating.
Yeah, no, I've been told about that, and I do want to talk to him about that. And he's a good dude, so I'm really looking forward to. They're another band that if they provide some regular content and some really, we can just keep flying the flag for them for as long as they want us to, because I think they're a great band.
He's a pretty hard-working dude. I don't think you're going to have a shortage of content with him.
Oh, yeah. He needs to, he needs to give us some great content to work with, and I'm sure he will, So I'll be chatting to him about that, coming right up, so because we're going to schedule that release date real soon. And I would love it if they could start getting mentioned in the same breath as like a Man of War or something like that. That'd be so cool.
Absolutely. So I'm going to probably end it off here for a little bit. But
I gotta go.
Yeah, but I want to tell you, I appreciate the short notice. This kind of getting out, hanging out together on a whim, and getting you on the show because it's always fascinating. You're one of those people that I could speak to that's done practically everything in the music business. So it's always fun to really be able to talk to you. The last interview we did, I thought was a lot of fun. And I'm really looking forward to this Jack Star album. I think people are going to be blown away by this. I think it's
so nice of you to say
good.
As far as the whole done everything thing, to me, I just, my role in the music business as a manager, as a musician, as a label guy, as a guy that spent a hell of a lot of time on a tour bus, and I'm about to get on another one in about 4 days. It's like being MacGyver.
Yeah.
You just don't know where your adventure is going to take you, and you always got to find your way out of something. And it's never what you expected it was going to be. And I that's the best. The people go, "What's it like?" I go, "It's like, you ever seen MacGyver?" And they go, "Yeah." I go, "It's like that. You're always in some strange country dealing with any element of friendly to hostile to peculiar people. Usually, hopefully, more friendly than the others that I mentioned, and it's always a wild ride. You never know what's going to go on. So,
yeah, the business is a crazy business to be involved in. I
just got an email like 25 minutes ago when I said, "Hey, give me a minute, I need to answer this email." It was another curveball thrown at me that I wasn't expecting. Yeah. I'm like, what? No, So, yeah, there's always something.
Well, hey, man.
You have good days and you have bad days.
No, I get it. And again, I appreciate you coming on. It was a lot of fun. And
right on, man.
Looking forward to not only a lot of these releases coming out on Bravewords, but I'm really looking forward to this Jack Star record. I think people are really going to love this record when it comes out. So,
and I'll give you the exclusive. We have finished the 3rd Dragonsclaw record.
Cool.
And I'm going to send it to you now.
Cool. I can't wait to hear it, man. Well, hey, you have a good one. I'm going to head out here. I got to get prepared for yet another guest or two on the show coming up here. And I appreciate your time as always, man. And always keep in touch.
Cool, man. Likewise. You take care.
Yep.
Right on, man.
Hey, everybody. Tony here from the Metal Command podcast. Again, I appreciate your support. Since 1998, I have hosted this show in one form or another, starting off in radio and now in the podcast format. Again, thanks for watching. And if you like what you see and hear on this show, by all means, please hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video. And if you see this program on any other form of social media, please give me a follow there. Again, I always appreciate your support.